I don't puff lie, I've got my third eye, naturally without any synthetic highs. There seems to be a lot of crews today, making rhythms, busting schisms, puffing isms, and all the infinite wisdom of the great one, elated one, debated one. I deflated one too many egos, now bros they go for solo, calling females hoes when they mama raised them dolo. But oh no, I can't let them do that, not right, Ed. I'd rather have you hold my head and rub my feet instead. So 1, 2, 1, 2. I'll be the female from the refugee crew.
I want to thank everybody for taking the time out to view this lecture. I made this series of lectures because I realized that the conscious community was missing out on valuable information. I understand the urge to relearn our history and metaphysics, but if we don't catch up in science, all of that would be worthless to us. If we don't get the science out of what our ancestors left us, then we're learning blank instructions, blank blueprints. So I've started a series basically talking about consciousness. No one in the conscious community is talking about consciousness or how the world around you affects your consciousness. So I hope you find this educating and sometimes entertaining. And I'm going to apologize for the delay on my lectures because they were supposed to come out a long time ago, but I had some issues. I'm actually not even doing this lecture here from a laptop. I'm doing it from a mobile device. So excuse the quality sometimes. And I hope you pass this on. I hope you found this very valuable. This lecture I'm going to be talking about frequencies and how they affect your conscious mind and body. And I'm going to talk about who's using those frequencies against us.
Of a weapon with no visible trace. A weapon that could knock out tanks, ships, and planes as fast as the speed of light. The same technology with modifications could disorient and even tranquilize military personnel, rendering them virtually helpless in the battle zone. These are the new weapons of war we will examine in this series. For the past 40 years, the world has been riveted by the threat of nuclear war, and more recently by the prospect of space defenses using lasers and other modern technologies. But while both sides at the Geneva summit will be focusing on these matters, progress is being made in even newer weapons that could render any arms agreement relatively useless. Lightning is the most dramatic form of energy to be found in nature. Scientists have succeeded in creating limited types of artificial lightning, and some think that these could be the forerunners of a new type of directed energy weapon, part of a family of weapons which operate within the radio frequency segment of the electromagnetic spectrum and are thus referred to as radio frequency weapons. Dr. James Frazier has researched electromagnetic effects for the Air Force for over 10 years, and he, like a small but growing number of weapons experts, feels that radio frequency, or RF weapons, could be the wild card in the ongoing arms race.
You could have tremendous amounts of radiative power. And what you did with that power then is a matter of engineering design and what your goal is.
Robert Bass, a physicist and PhD in mathematics, is working on U.S. weapons research. He says that the Soviets seem to be ahead in a number of areas, and especially in RF weapons.
We are behind the Soviet Union in directed energy weapons based on 60 gigahertz microwave beams.
Dr. Bass and others feel the most likely form of Soviet RF weaponry would be high-powered microwaves, similar to a focused, ultra-high-intensity radar beam. It would literally cook humans and knock out computers and electronic surveillance and communications gear. An operational RF weapon, relatively cheap and reusable, could devastate sophisticated and expensive war machinery. The $20 million F-16 fighter, for example, is totally controlled through electronic sensors and computers. With no manual flight controls, the plane would literally fall out of the sky after being hit with a high-intensity pulse of microwave radiation. Scientists say that microwaves and other types of RF pulses operating at specific frequencies or windows can be transmitted with little or no loss of power. Machines known as gyrotrons can produce the massive pulses needed to drive these devices, and it's believed that the Soviet Union has a 3 to 5 year lead in this technology. Over the past year, CNN has repeatedly asked the Department of Defense and the Air Force about radio frequency weapons. After much resistance, DoD finally said that the subject was too sensitive to discuss. In my next report, unexplained cloud-like phenomena which may be evidence of a Soviet breakthrough in RF technology. Chuck DeCaro, CNN Special Assignments.
Received today is a monumental document in more ways than one. But it is a very, very important piece of America's history, and it will shape America's future in ways that will make us a more honorable, more successful, and more ethical country. What this committee learned, I would like to review today with a little more detail than Dr. Faden said, because I think it must be engraved on our national memory. Thousands of government-sponsored experiments did take place at hospitals, universities, and military bases around our nation. The goal was to understand the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. While most of the tests were ethical by any standards, some were unethical, not only by today's standards, but by the standards of the time in which they were conducted. They failed both the test of our national values and the test of humanity. Informed consent means your doctor tells you the risk of the treatment you are about to undergo. In too many cases, informed consent was withheld. Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret, and they were shrouded not for a compelling reason of national security, but for the simple fear of embarrassment, and that was wrong. So today, on behalf of another generation of American leaders and another generation of American citizens, the United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities. When the government does wrong, we have a moral responsibility to admit it.
Technology exists to induce sound into the brain at a distance, monitor and alter brain waves at a distance, alter behavior at a distance, induce images into the brain, can target individual organs, can disrupt the calcium ions binding on individual cell surfaces at a distance, creating pain and other effects.
All right, I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank everybody for watching Conscious Republic Lectures. My first lecture, is going to be about frequencies. And not frequencies metaphysically, but scientifically. And frequencies are important for a lot of reasons besides the metaphysical aspect. They're important because of how our bodies react to them. And these next few slides, I'm going to just give some basic vocabulary and information to help you understand where I'm going with this. All right. Light has a different effect on black bodies than it does whites or non-melanized people. This fact plays an important part in the significance of treating Africans with the science of photobiogenics. Black chemistry research has discovered that melanin reflects the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which is composed of cosmic rays, gamma rays, microwaves, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, infrared rays, light rays, and radio waves. These waves exist naturally throughout the universe, and the length and size of the waves vary tremendously from the most minute to the extreme of several miles. The visible spectrum of white light only represents a small section of the full electromagnetic spectrum, but the total spectrum, which includes white light, is black light, and melanin is a solid form of this total spectrum of black light. Thus, our bodies reflect the total electromagnetic spectrum. We also absorb the total electromagnetic spectrum. Melanin in the human body is synonymous with chlorophyll in plants. Chlorophyll function is a converter of solar energy and is essential for maintaining the vitality of the plant. Melanin, on the other hand, is a converter of physical energy, and it is responsible for manufacturing and sustaining human life. It keeps the black human in constant contact with the natural radiant energies of the universe. So I want to go into this, what is sound? And I want to be very literal with this. That's why I put these definitions on here. Sound is vibrations that travel through the air or another medium that can be heard when they reach a person's or animal's ear. I'm going to explain the auditory center of the brain, which is shown in red. It's concerned with hearing, found in the temporal lobe and the cerebral cortex on both sides of the brain. The auditory pathway begins in the ear with the nerve fibers, where sound waves are converted to nerve impulses. They travel to the auditory nerve and to the auditory cortex of the brain. During the passage to the auditory cortex, some of the auditory nerve fibers cross. This results in the sound of one ear passing to both cortexes. It passes to the auditory cortex and the temporal lobe of the brain to process how sound is perceived. All right. In a nutshell, there are 4 recognized brain waves: beta, alpha, theta, and delta. The most recently researched brain frequency is gamma, which is the fastest. Why are brain waves important? You can use sound to positively alter your brain wave frequencies and produce specific desired results. So I want you to remember that. Alright, so we're going to go into the brain right quick. The amygdala. The amygdala is the integrative center for emotions, emotional behavior, and motivation. If the brain is turned upside down, the end of the structure continuous with the hippocampus is the uncus. If you peel away the uncus, you will expose the amygdala. They're thought to be a part of the limbic system within the brain, which is responsible for emotions, survival instincts, and memory. The frequencies I found the most interesting are the subsonic and ultrasonic frequencies. The frequencies we as humans cannot hear anymore. This is anything above 200 hertz, anything below 20. Above 20 and everything below 20. Especially ultrasound and ultrasonic frequencies.
Now you have to excuse all this early vocabulary. I promise this is going to be my most boring lecture. I'm going to get into some more interesting things after this, but I feel like this is important for everybody to know, especially for the people that's into a lot of music and TV watching. Alright, so back to this. All right. From a recent article in the Volkskrant, I read that now they're able to use ultrasonic sound as birth control for men. The man has to be in ultrasonic sound for 15 minutes, 2 days in a row, and that would reduce the production of sperm. There are other uses of ultrasound, such as heavy cleaning through ultrasound. You might have seen a Telcel commercial about this. Or maybe in the future, ultrasound will replace a knife in surgery, which is technically, it's already being done. I got this out of a book that was written in like, I think the 50s or 60s. Alright, music influences our bodies. It causes us to breathe faster. It can cause our thinking to be chaotic and all over the place. It can even, for some people, create the dopamine in the brain. Also, I believe it's a very important part when raising a child to use music as a part of education. Now, if you look at China, they're very good at implementing music into education. It influences the way they learn, look at things at a young age. High-frequency sound produced a non-audible area which couldn't be heard in daily life. The frequency range above 22 Hz is called high frequency. It is components are called HFC, high frequency components. When this natural sound is combined with high frequency, it seems to give a pleasurable feeling, as in ocean waves. We call this phenomena the hypersonic effects. Now I'm going to get into this. What I really wanted to get off of this is this. Brain waves were measured by an EEG system with 8 channels using 2 electrodes. Generally, the high-frequency induced EEG changes featured by an increase in alpha waves and a decrease in beta waves. I'm going to go through a lot of this fast at the beginning because I really want to get into this other stuff.
This is a Tesla coil. It was invented some 90 years ago, but now a growing number of experts in the United States feel that it may form the basis of a new generation of Soviet weapons. They are known as radio frequency, or RF weapons, because they operate in the radio frequency spectrum. Their existence is noted in this U.S. Department of Defense publication, which says the Soviets could use them to destroy components of missiles, to interfere with radar and other electronic systems, and even to alter human mind functions. The concept of RF weaponry was predicted at the turn of the century by Nikola Tesla, an American who had emigrated from Yugoslavia. He is best remembered as the man who invented alternating current electricity. In 1899, Tesla built this giant coil which produced 10 million volts of artificial lightning. From it, he theorized the possibility of death rays. This and many other of his ideas about the physics of electricity were ridiculed by the scientific establishment.
Pure science is not a sure thing. You can't predict what's going to work out and what's not going to work out.
Robert Golka, a research scientist, built a replica of the Tesla coil about 80 years later. Golka was trying to produce a phenomenon known as ball lightning. He also used the Tesla coil to conduct testing for the U.S. Air Force.
What I was doing was setting in maybe 5-foot-long models of advanced fighter aircraft, and we would want to try to find out which part of the airplane was more vulnerable to lightning strikes, whether it was a wingtip or the canard where the pilot sat.
These experiments could also demonstrate the effect of the electromagnetic pulse of a nuclear blast, And Golka says the effect of RF weapons as well. Golka thinks that Tesla's theory that electromagnetic power could be transmitted through the Earth and its atmosphere without wires is a key element in the Soviet Union's work on RF weapons. Tesla's novel weapons theories were generally ignored in the United States. Nikola Tesla died in 1943, and after the Second World War, all his papers and effects were shipped to his native Yugoslavia, where they were enshrined in a museum. Some say that that museum proved to be a gold mine for Soviet weapons scientists.
We haven't even formally, so far as I know, to ourselves admitted that these weapons exist in the hands of the Soviet Union.
Weapons analyst Tom Bearden, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel, is among a small group of scientists and engineers who believe that the Soviets have perfected Tesla's ideas and are developing radio frequency weapons on a scale unimagined in this country.
There have been a series of tests of these kinds of weapons, apparently, for a number of years. For example, airliners from Iran, before the fall of the Shah, saw deep within the Soviet Union very large, glowing spherical balls of light, which started out small and then expanded to very large size, which are apparently these kinds of weapons for use in an anti-ballistic missile defense role.
Bearden believes that these satellite photographs are of mysterious non-nuclear explosions near an uninhabited island in the East Siberian Sea, and that they are discharges from an RF weapon that uses intersecting energy beams called scalars.
In doing so, you can create, for example, either an electromagnetic explosion at a distance, or you can create an electromagnetic implosion at a distance, the extraction of energy from a distant point. This would look like a cold explosion, so to speak. And I believe the thing on April the 9th, 1984, off the coast of Japan, that involved several 747 jet airliners, I believe that incident was a test of a cold explosion weapons. At least it met all the characteristics.
Pilot Doug Happ was in one of the 5 airline crews that saw an incredibly large cloud rising from the moonlit overcast below.
It looked like a plate coming up through an overcast, but it just kept expanding, and as it got higher, it was apparent that you could see right through the middle of it, so it looked like a big smoke ring. At the time that we first noticed this cloud, we weren't sure what to do, and we took no evasive action because we didn't know which way to go. And I think eventually we either ran through it or it completely engulfed us.
Happ says when his flight reached Anchorage, Alaska, it was checked for radioactive contamination. None was found. Dr. James Fraser has done extensive research in electromagnetic effects for the U.S. Air Force.
It could be due to a strong electromagnetic beam, but we don't know that. They can also be caused by chance terminal gradients. We've had for several years studies of clear air turbulence, for instance, which have produced this kind of a disruption. The people who cited those are experienced pilots and should have been familiar with that kind of event. And this apparently was something outside their experience.
There have been a number of times when Soviet technological surprise has upset the strategic balance. In 1948, the Soviets detonated an A-bomb years before it was thought possible. In 1957, the Soviets stunned the world by launching Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. And in 1976, the Soviets were discovered to have been embarked upon a program to build particle beam weapons, a discovery which led, 5 years later, to America's Star Wars program. In each case, the United States was able to regain the balance. But this time, with radio frequency weapons, some scientists feel that the Soviet lead may be permanent. In my next report, how radio frequency devices can be used as weapons against the human mind. Chuck DeCaro, CNN, on special assignment.
This is a book from the Library of Congress, Biological Effects of Power, Frequency, Electric, and Magnetic Fields. So this is the first thing I wanted to point out that they were studying. Cellular level experiments. Until the mid-1970s, few conjectured that there could be any effect on the biological system from electric or magnetic fields of the strengths usually present in the environment. This was in part due to the fact that these fields can transfer only minute amounts of energy to the cell, and hence cannot disrupt chemical bonds in the cell as ionizing radiation can. There is not even enough energy in 60 Hz fields to heat the cell to any significant extent as microwave or radio frequency radiation does. A considerable body of evidence has emerged that points to the cell membrane, the membrane enveloping the cell, as the primary site of interaction between ELF fields, extremely low frequency fields. In addition to serving as the boundary in maintaining the structural integrity of the cell membrane is responsible for some of the most critical functions of the cell, such as controlling the flow of materials and energy signals into the cell and transmitting information arriving at its surface to the interior of the cell so that the appropriate life processes can take place. It is highly selective filter that maintains an unequal concentration of ions, those are charged atoms, negatively or positively, on either side, and allows nutrients to enter the waste products to leave the cell. This is made possible by very specialized components in the cell membrane. I want you to remember all of that. I'm building the foundation to where I'm going. Extremely low frequency field experiments on the cellular level have concentrated on examining how some of these specific processes governed by the membrane change as the result of exposure to the extremely low frequency fields. When reading the results, it is important to understand that even when an effect is exerted at the cellular level, it is still hard to extrapolate what, if anything, that effects implies for the organism as a whole. Here's some of the effects: interaction with the cell response to different hormones and enzymes, including those that are involved in cell growth, processes, and stress responses. Interaction with the cell response to chemical neurotransmitters, interaction with immune response of cells, interaction with cancerous cells. This is everything that they found can be affected with extremely low frequencies. We're going to get into that as we go on. The observed effects have certain peculiarities. Some effects described below occur at some frequency and intensity values, but not at others. Some effects depend upon the duration of the exposure. Some effects persist only for a brief period of time after the exposure is discontinued. These peculiarities make it difficult to extrapolate experience from the more familiar chemical and ionizing radiation toxicology to the realm of ELF exposure and effects. Most of these studies described below have been carried out in single laboratories and, with a few exceptions, have not been replicated in other laboratories. Although a number of high-quality experiments have been performed in the last decade, we still do not have enough robust replicated results to build a coherent scientific or phenomenological picture of the spectrum of effects, and we are far from having a good theoretical model, which is a goddamn lie. All right, we're going to keep going. All right, so we're going to get into some of the things that they found is affected by ELFs on the cellular level. The only studies on endocrine tissue in vitro have been done by this guy and co-workers who investigated the effects of 60 Hz electric fields on the adrenal tissue. They found that a 60 Hz electric field caused an increase in the production of corticosterone in response to the hormone ACTH. ACTH is a hormone, one of whose functions is to stimulate the production of corticosterone by the adrenal tissue. In the present context, the production of corticosterone in response to the ACTH is used as a biological process to examine a possible effect of electric field exposure on a specific tissue function. The tissue level effect noted below cannot be simply interpreted in terms of consequences in the whole animal. The field did not produce any change in the amount of hormones produced by tissue alone, but when the tissue was activated with ACTH and the resulting production of corticosterone was measured, there was an increase in production for certain values of the field for certain durations of exposure. This is the effect showed intensity windows combined with an exposure time dependence. So it all depends on how long they exposed you to these frequencies when it came to this particular experiment. So interaction with the cell response to neurotransmitters. As much of the activity in the brain takes place through electrical signals, it is responsible to examine whether some of the chemical production in the brain are affected by exposure to electromagnetic fields. Interaction with immune responsive cells. The immune responsive cells, that is the ability of cells to act against foreign agents such as viruses and toxic chemicals. It is important in combating infection and maintaining a healthy function. This one is important to remember too. All right, here are some general observations on cellular level experiments. Despite many negative results, a significant number of cell level experiments have shown positive effects from exposure to extremely low frequency fields. These are summarized in table 3-1. You can't really see those. The cell membrane is one site of action of the field, and therefore processes governed by the cell membrane may be candidates for disruption by field exposure. The immune response and cell-cell communication being such two processes. The fields do not appear to act differently on the DNA structure, but may alter cellular processes by interfering with the transcription by RNA, a process in the chain of command from DNA to protein production. So they can indirectly affect your DNA, is basically what they're saying. The effects may show a complex dependence on the intensity and frequency of the field and the time pattern of exposure to the field. Further, the effects of fields may depend on the direction of the applied field in relation to the Earth's magnetic field, or upon whether the field is simply alternating field or pulse field. All right, here are effects on hormone levels in the central nervous system. Levels of specific hormones are maintained in balance for the proper functioning of the central nervous system, CNS. Most prominent among the amino acid hormones synthesized in the brain and the nervous system that are dopamine, epinephrine, as they are released from the nerve endings during psychologic stimulation. They are called neurotransmitters. They have several functions that affect the heart, liver, spleen, lung, and brain physiology. They control blood pressure, heartbeats, some forms of headache, and basic metabolic rate. Deficient or excessive secretion of these or alterations of their action cause major physiological and psychological problems. Increased metabolism is also associated with neuroblastoma, a tumor originating in the neural crest, often during fetal development. Alright. This is just stuff to remember when I get into why they were doing these studies. The levels of these hormones are not only responsive to external and internal signals, but undergo a regular pattern of variation in different periodic rhythms. One such rhythm is the circadian rhythm, which has a period of about 24 hours. A study at Battelle noted a phase shift on the normal variations of hormones in adult male rats. but no change in body or organ weights. A pineal function change was seen in the studies. Continued exposure produced a depression of the nighttime levels of melatonin in rats. Now, I don't know if you ever studied the way they test medicine and stuff like that on non-melanated rats, and I think it was kind of suspicious that they use melanated rats for these studies. This pineal melatonin depression effect did not appear in the animals immediately on exposure. The onset of the effect appears after 2 and before 3 weeks of exposure, and less than 3 days after the cessation of exposure, the levels return to normal. This experiment is discussed again in the section on circadian rhythm, Alright. That's all I wanted to really get off that slide. Alright. Now we're going to start getting into the interesting shit. Experiments with human subjects. Like many other animals, humans can detect power frequency electric fields through stimulation of receptors on the surface of the brain. The lowest detection threshold for vertical electric fields were associated with the stimulation of hand hair with the hand held over the head. The median threshold of perception across 136 individuals for this posture was found to be 7 kV. With arms to the side, the field is perceived as stimulation of head hair. In a carefully designed experiment, conducted a study to evaluate human perception performance and physiology in 60 Hz electric and magnetic fields. The effect of fields on performance was studied through a specific battery of tests that measured effects on the EEG in response to visual and auditory signals, memory, reaction time, time perception, and some specific information processing abilities. The perception experiment showed that while subjects differed in their sensitivity to the fields, there was no difference when the fields were presented individually or in combination. Fields increasing gradually resulted in a higher perception threshold than a sudden onset. Okay, there was something else. Okay, that's all I want to get off here. Alright, we're going to jump right into central nervous system effects. As a system that uses low frequency fields for its intracellular communication and function, the brain and central nervous system are natural candidates for interaction with fields. The implications of tissue or cellular level in vitro experiments for the whole organism are not clear. But the animal studies, including the circadian variations introduced by fields, indicate that field CNS, remember that central nervous system, interactions may have dependencies which are at very specific frequencies and intensities and may vary with background static fields present, the time of day, and the duration of exposure. Developing nervous systems may be particularly susceptible, and effects may be latent, manifested only in specific situations later in time. More than any other agent known, except perhaps some psychotropic drugs, ELF fields are specific with respect to the regions of the brain tissue affected and the point of administration. We're going to look at cancer promotion. The following points summarize the key experimental results that are consistent with a possible association between exposure to ELF fields and the occurrence of cancer. ELF fields are not known to cause any chromosomal damage and hence are not likely initiators of cancer. Some cellular level experiments indicate that the cell membrane is the site of the interaction between ELF fields and the cell. The membrane site responsible for this action also has been shown to be a receptor for chemical cancer promoters. ELF fields have been shown to increase ODC activity. All known cancer promoters stimulate ODC. However, the converse is not true. Many agents that produce ODC activity are not cancerous promoters. Alterations in protein synthesis and immunological and hormone status and metabolic competence via shifts can all contribute to the progress of initiated cancer. I can barely see it. All right. Pineal melatonin depressed has been associated with cancer growth. So they kind of contradicted the last two statements by saying ELFs have nothing to do with cancer, when we obviously looked earlier in the book and they was talking about this right here just a couple of slides ago. ELF fields depress pineal melatonin levels in animals. Functions of gap junctions are disrupted by ELF fields. Similar disruptions are produced by other known chemical promoters.
Sources say gunman Aaron Alexis left behind 2 short phrases on the side of the shotgun used in the massacre. One of the messages, scratched into the gun's metal, reads, "Better off this way." The other is more cryptic, "My ELF weapon." Investigators don't know what the etchings mean. ELF might be a reference to extremely low-frequency radio waves used by the Navy to communicate with submarines. It may also, though, relate to a strange incident which happened 6 weeks ago in Newport, Rhode Island. Alexis complained to police that stalkers were using a microwave-type machine to send vibrations into his body. Newport investigators took a report and gave it to local Navy police. It apparently was never passed up the chain of command. After the Newport episode, Alexis sought help at 2 hospitals operated by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Government records show that on August 23rd, Alexis visited a VA emergency room in Providence complaining of insomnia. He received medication to help him sleep. Then 5 days later, on August 28th, he refilled the sleep aid prescription at a VA medical center in Washington. The Department of Veterans Affairs also revealed that Alexis was on partial disability for orthopedic issues and ringing in his ears. He received disability benefits totaling $395 a month. His family has claimed that Alexis had also sought and received treatment for mental health issues, but the VA said it had no record of Alexis receiving that kind of care. In a statement, the VA said he never sought an appointment from a mental health specialist. Now, the FBI still does not have a motive for the shooting, Scott, and investigators say so far they found no clear connections between Alexis and any of his victims.
Bob Orr in our Washington newsroom. Bob, thank you.
All right, so here are some of the major programs who are funding ELF bioeffects research. The U.S. Navy played an early role in research on bioeffects of ELF electric and magnetic fields in 1968. The Navy proposed to build an ELF submarine communications facility in northern Wisconsin that would have converted many thousands of square miles covered. Over the last decade, the Department of Energy, DOE, of Energy Storage and Distribution, has been the chief federal source of support for research on the possible biological effects of low-frequency fields. The federal government has not been the only source of research support in the United States. From 1982 through 1986, the state of New York operated a $5 million research program on field effects administered by the New York Department of Public Health, with money largely provided by the state's electric utilities. And here's a few of the programs. This is one of the programs that we were just recently looking at. It's not really the point of this, but It's just nice to know. We don't gotta look at that. All right, so why is all this research important? All right. So after all that research, they came up with a whole lot of new patents. And this is just a few. I'm going to get into some more. This is just a preview of what's to come. Echelon satellites. This is the NSA's satellite computer monitoring of all telecommunications worldwide. To intercept conversations, emails, etc., to steal ideas and harass targets, writers, whistleblowers, etc. To monitor and stop terrorists and other criminals will be a potential good use, but this is the actual criminal use that they're using it for. Audio-visual satellites, allowing 24/7 surveillance of anyone, even in their homes. To gather blackmail-friendly material to oppress targets and other citizens, to feed results to media political criminals. Interactive transsector device, to spy on political targets, etc., by finding, locking on to, and tracking those victims so as to terrorize, torture them. Methods of altering consciousness. Now, these are the patent designs right here. This is only a few of them. I'm going to get into some more of them later. To alter targets' moods by stimulating the brain to exhibit certain rhythms, angry, sad, sleepy, etc. EEG cloning / feedback. That's basically how they knew exactly. That EEG machine is very important. Brainwave analyzers, remote neural monitoring and electronic brain linking via satellites to read the minds of targets, to rob, rape, terrorize, and oppress completely yet covertly. Experiments in mind control, AI, and cloning are also carried out. Neurophones, to make the target hear voices via the laser, microwave, radio wave direction of sound that's being converted to electrical impulse to go straight to the target's brain. So what is a patent? A patent is an exclusive right granted for an invention, which is a product or a process that provides a new way of doing something or offers a new technical solution to a problem. What does a patent do? A patent provides protection for the invention to the owner of the patent. The protection is granted for a limited period, generally 20 years. What kind of protection does a patent offer? Patent protection means that the invention cannot be commercially made, used, distributed, or sold without the patent owner's consent. So if these are U.S. patents, none of that stuff can be commercially made. These patent rights are usually enforced in a court, which in most systems holds the authority to stop patent infringement.
This is a list of 23 key mind control-related devices that have been issued patents from the United States Patent Office between 1956 and 2003. Many of these patents are microwave technology, used in electromagnetic mind control, and organized stalking of individuals with directed energy weapons. This is not a list of all patented mind control technology and devices in the United States. This is only some of them. National Security Agency devil worshippers, known to be working long-range takeover plans here spanning several generations, were also known to have plans to use many of these technologies to mind control the planet, including the United States population. These satanic mind control monsters are still inside of our government today, running the show behind the shield of the National Security Act of 1947. Other mad scientists, such as Dr. M.A. Persinger, inventor of the God helmet, and authority on electromagnetic mind control via microwaves, have further developed electromagnetic mind control using these patented technologies.
What Dr. Persinger is saying is that virtually any mental state can be artificially injected into a human brain from an exterior source. The most frightening thing is that the means for doing this already exists in a fully operational form on a worldwide basis. Quote, "The power levels for these amplitudes are similar to those associated with the signals generated globally by radio and communication system. Within the last 2 decades, a potential has emerged which was improbable, but which is now marginally feasible. This potential is the technical capability to influence directly the major portion of the approximately 6 billion brains of the human species by generating neural information within a physical medium within which all members of the species are immersed." Unquote. Dr. Persinger's message, minus the jargon, is that the entire human race can be controlled through the use of electromagnetic influence piggybacked on television and radio networks or other technological means.
Effectively, all consciousness is due to electromagnetic patterns generated within the brain. What we do is imitate what the brain normally does and apply it experimentally.
Where are these thoughts coming from?
Those thoughts came from the Neuroscience Laboratory at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario.
I've got one that can see.
He's a tall Caucasian male that doesn't appear armed, wearing sunglasses.
I don't like this one bit. Not one bit.
And here's a list of 23 more mind-inducing patents. One of them got cut off, so I'll say 22. And if you look at 3014477 U.S. patent, hypnotic inducer, which is a mind control machine. You got the next one, apparatus for producing visual stimulation, subconscious transmission via movie film. Apparatus for producing visual and auditory stimulation, subconscious transmission via television. If you go down again, you have the nervous system excitation device, method and apparatus for improving neural performance in human subjects. Okay, you go down some more, method of an apparatus for producing swept frequency modulated audio signal patterns for inducing sleep, and it's a brain frequency broadcast. Method of inducing and maintaining stages of sleep in the human being, FFR, frequency following response microwave. And then you have, let's go down to this one, auditory subliminal message system in method, subliminal brainwash via music or other sound. Then you have this one, method of changing a person's behavior, subconscious brainwash via video. Now these are all the patent numbers. You can actually look all this up. They even have the blueprints available. If you know how to read blueprints and schematics, you can make this stuff at home. Auditory subliminal programming system, silent brainwash via music or other sound. Let's see what other. Let's see, microwave hearing, method in system for warning birds of hazards, which is a weird invention to have. All right. So we're going to get into this one. U.S. States Patent 477529. An auditory subliminal programming system includes a subliminal message encoder that generates fixed frequency security tones and combines them with a subliminal message signal to produce an encoded subliminal message signal, which is recorded on audio tape or the like. A corresponding subliminal decoder / mixer is connected as part of a user's conventional stereo system and receives as inputs an audio program selected by the user and the encoded subliminal message. So this stuff is in your conventional stereo system. The decoder/mixer filters the security tones that present from the subliminal message and combines the message signals with the selected low frequency signals associated with enhanced relaxation and concentration to produce a composite auditory subliminal signal. On to the next patent. It's the same. Okay. And this is a little bit more about this one, background of the invention. The invention relates generally to systems for generating auditory subliminal messages. So a lot of people be like, oh man, that's conspiracy and shit like that, when the information is out there. You just have to look for it. And then you got U.S. Patent 4395600. Ambient audio signals from the customer shopping area within a store are sensed and fed to a signal processing circuit that produces a control signal which varies with variations in the amplitude of the sensed audio signals. A control circuit adjusts the amplitude of an auditory subliminal anti-shoplifting message to increase with increasing amplitudes of sensed audio signals and increase with decreasing amplitudes of sensed audio signals. This amplitude controlled subliminal message can be mixed with background music. That's why it's music playing in the fucking store and transmitted to a shopping area. To reduce distortion of subliminal message, its amplitude is controlled to increase at a rate slower than the rate of increase of the amplitude ambient audio signals from the area. So they're basically playing it at a different rate than the music that's playing in the store. You don't even notice that the music that's playing is basically trying to stop you from stealing shit. Okay, here is U.S. Patent 5159703. I had to look everywhere for this one. This is the one that I guess they just really didn't want anybody to find. So it is a silent communication system in which non-auroral carriers in the very low or very high frequency range or in adjacent ultrasonic frequency spectrum are amplitude or frequency modulated with the desired intelligence and propagated acoustically and vibrationally for inducement into the brain, typically through the use of loudspeakers, earphones. The modulated carriers may be transmitted directly in real time or may be conveniently recorded and stored on mechanical, magnet, or optical media for delayed or repeated transmission to the listener. Man, and y'all be talking about this shit as conspiracy. Now here's what is claimed they can do with this shit, which is proven, because if you look at here, U.S. patent documents, these are some of the patents that they used to come up with this one patent. Now if the U.S. owns these patents, obviously they could use them. Alright, a silent communication system comprising amplitude modulated carrier means for generating signals located in a non-audible portions of the audio and in lower portion of the ultrasonic frequency spectrum. Signals modulated with information to be perceived by a listener's brain. Acoustic and ultrasonic transducer means for propagating said signals for inducement into the brain. Everything that they are into when it comes to these frequencies are brain inducement. And I know how much the conscious community is into resonating with frequencies, but you have to also be aware of the frequencies that are affecting you that you really aren't aware of. That's why balance is extremely important. You have to separate yourself from some of that stuff sometimes. And some of that stuff is the music we listen to and shit like that. So here is patent 4717343. A method of conditioning a person's unconscious mind in order to effect a desired change in the person's behavior, which does not require the services of a trained therapist. Instead, the person to be treated views a program of video pictures appearing on the screen. The program as viewed by the person's unconscious mind acts to condition the person's thought patterns in a manner which alters the person's behavior in a positive way. Now, they say that, but we all know that, they're not really using this in a positive manner. And that pretty much explained that pretty good. Alright, I want to thank y'all for checking out this lecture. My next lecture will be a lot more interesting. I just felt like this was information that needed to be brought to light. It's something that people can look into further themselves. I know I kind of blew through this kind of fast, but I didn't really want to bore y'all because I know this isn't the most interesting topic. My next lecture will be either free energy techniques or the alchemy of colors. I haven't completely made my mind up. I'm still on the fence, but I'm leaning towards free energy. So I hope you share this. I hope you enjoyed it.
Suspect that the woodpecker is designed to interfere with human brain function.
As far as I'm concerned, the potential that this has for producing a direct psychoactive effect upon the total American population is there. Has never been disproven.
Dr. Robert Becker is a pioneer in the field of bioeffects of electromagnetism.
The signal range within which the woodpecker operates is that which has been reported by many investigators to produce a tranquilizing effect upon animals.
We are just incredibly sensitive to these magnetic stimuli.
Dr. Bob Beck, a PhD in nuclear engineering, has done extensive research into electromagnetic effects on humans.
The signal was permeating power grids in the United States. It was being picked up by power lines, re-radiated. It was coming into the homes on the light circuits.
I was surprised after coming here that the influence of electromagnetic fields was almost completely ignored here.
Dr. Larissa Valenskaya was heavily involved in Soviet electromagnetic research before being allowed to emigrate to the United States. She told CNN about Soviet research in electromagnetic effects.
They demonstrated theoretically and also demonstrated experimentally that low frequency, low energy electromagnetic fields also can possess biological efficiency because any field not only carries energy but also carries information.
She stated that the research was carried out on orders from the Soviet government.
Of course, the military were extremely interested in this potential of remote influence.
Is the United States military working in the field of electronic mind control? Officially, the Department of Defense will not comment because the subject area is, quote, too sensitive. But CNN has learned from this government scientist who did not want to be identified that a Navy laboratory conducted research into the use of an RF device for counterterrorism and special operations.
It's possible to entrain a certain percentage of a population, apparently, with weak magnetic fields.
The study also showed that RF signals could dissolve certain types of rat brain cells at a distance, causing disorientation and nausea. According to the scientist, even though the program was successful, the government never followed up on it. Dr. James Frazier did electromagnetic research for the U.S. Air Force for many years. At one time, he proposed a battlefield RF weapons system.
You could make an antenna that would be carryable by a helicopter, and that this could be expected to produce a wide variety of symptoms, actually, by humans who happen to be standing in the beam.
According to Dr. Fraser, the Air Force never followed up. At Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, another RF weapons concept is nicknamed the brain bomb. According to the book Star Warriors, the brain bomb would focus a nuclear blast into a huge pulse of low-frequency RF energy that would stun huge numbers of troops. Apparently, it too has not yet been funded. The Department of Defense will not comment about Soviet RF weapons, or if American RF weapons development is going forward. However, experts interviewed by CNN say that the Soviets are apparently ahead and could exploit that lead in a surprise strategic move, a move that could have grave consequences for the United States. From Washington, this is Chuck DeCaro, CNN Special Assignments.
That mind control slaves were permitted any drug except marijuana. Why? It's an excellent question. The effects of marijuana on the brain are not conducive to mind control.
It doesn't mean you can't be traumatized and put under mind control. It just means it screws up the programming.
Because it actually opens neuron pathways in the brain. It expands thought. I'm not going to stand here and speak pro-marijuana because...
No, because somebody be putting it in my car and popping me for it.
But I am anti-marijuana because we see all these ads on TV and everything, and even Dole and Clinton in their campaigns are saying, what's it, Dole said, guns, violence, and marijuana, you know, as if it's so violent, because it is not conducive to mind control. They want it off the streets more than they want their drugs, like cocaine, off the street. Marijuana is especially targeted. I don't promote the use of marijuana as a Band-Aid for mind control because, again, knowledge is our only defense against it.
Time. Started from small crimes where others had big tops. I was slinging small dimes, trying to make the come up. The blow used to numb up a few G's a week.